This is the SEC Insider Hit. It's driven by the John Deere tractors at Mississippi Ag. Visit agup.com to find a retail location near you.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's a good question. I need help from my listeners. You guys are the experts, especially those of you with 27 Twitter followers. Out of bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN.
You mean sources?
I've got sources. Mississippi State does not want to play football. Oh, wait, they did.
They almost the two games they came closest to winning were the two games where everyone said they didn't want to play.
I've got sources. Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. I will get into the Kirk Herbstreit nonsense at some point. God bless Kirk. Just stop. So, sources tell me that Will Rogers is pretty good, Blake. But I need help from my listeners. This is the Mississippi Ag John Deere Tractor SEC Insider Hit. 2 locations, Mississippi Ag, Canton and Pearl. Your next John Deere Tractor, farm, family, land, hunting camp, you know where to go. John Deere, America's Tractor. Mississippi Ag, 16 locations, 2 in the metro area. Canton and Pearl. Visit agup.com. All right, here we go. When was the last time, and make sure you get all this right, a kid from the state of Mississippi, quarterback, had this kind of impact at Mississippi State and or Ole Miss? At the quarterback position from Mississippi, not from Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, Texas, whatever. John Rice Plumlee was, good last year. And he did it on the ground, but he also had some really nice throws out of Oak Grove. They played the state championship. They lost to Oxford last year, right? And then this is a rematch. 6A. John Rice was the year before that, 2 years. But he went to the state championship game too.
But I don't think you could.
So John Rice, but he didn't. Yeah, he did come in and have a really, really good year. He also got to play some G5 opponents. Can you imagine? All right, so Will Rogers has had a heck of a year as a true freshman. He's proven he can play. He's a dude. He's got accuracy. He's got the footwork. He moved around in the pocket against Georgia and Ole Miss. It collapsed on him a good bit. He extended plays. He's got the poise and the moxie. He's got dude qualities. Now, how good is he going to be? I don't know. But he's proven that he's way, 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 way more than serviceable, that as a true freshman, considering who they are with 50 scholarships and what they are as far as offensive skill talent, he's got freshmen. They played 7 freshmen on the offensive side of the football, like on Saturday.
They've played the most freshmen in P5.
So Will Rogers was the 19th ranked prospect in the state of Mississippi, 247 Sports, has been dropping dimes around the field the last couple of weeks and actually had some good moments against other teams too. And he's had at least 3 touchdown passes dropped, if not 4. Had one dropped Saturday. Malik Heath dropped one. So Osiris Mitchell's dropped one. Malik dropped another one. There was some others. So, he's put them right in the breadbasket in other games too. But the kid's had a phenomenal year. This is pretty impressive considering what we harp on all the time is, would you please
Positional value,
quarterbacks, edge rushers,
an athlete who's going to
left
play
tackles,
corner, receiver doesn't need to be number 4 in the state, probably.
Linebackers, please stop it. Running backs for the most part, please stop. Safeties, no.
A.J. Brown being number 1 or 2 or 3, whatever he was, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
A.J. was a different character.
I think Simmons was 1 and A.J. was 2. And if that was the case, they nailed it that year because
or you could switch
those 2 guys
could
be in. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Those 2 guys could be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But Will Rogers was ranked as the 19th best prospect, and Jaden Wally was the 17th best, according to 247 Sports. So from what your eyes have told you this year, I'm looking at the rankings, by the way. I I don't think most of these guys have even touched the field this year.
Well, who did we bring up? McKinley Jackson, right? Like, I don't think I've heard his name at A&M.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe he's been a force.
He'd have been a starter at State or Ole Miss, most likely.
Yes. I mean, if he had his act together, he would have been a starter or heavy in the rotation.
Yep.
Which is all you can ask for. I mean, early in your career for the most part.
So, quarterbacks from Mississippi that have made an impact at State or Ole Miss, the names that have come up on the text
John Rice
line.
Plumlee.
Tyler Russell.
He didn't play until his redshirt sophomore year.
Yeah, so he didn't play as a freshman.
He didn't play as a true freshman.
Okay. Did Romero Miller play as a freshman?
No.
Okay. That was the other name.
Patridge started for Ole Miss in 97. You remember? He ripped out Jackie Sherrill and Mississippi State's heart in an Egg Bowl game where they grabbed the golden egg. He let him down for a score and a 2-point conversion to win it. So no, Romero started in 98, Blake.
Okay. So that was the other.
He's a phenomenal player out of Shannon.
You can't even come up with Mississippi quarterbacks that played well, let alone freshmen, over the last 20 to 30. Like, because when you think about the names from Mississippi who also played well, it is Russell, Madkin, and I'm sorry, not Madkin, Miller, and JRP, and now Will Rogers for a few games. But the rest, I mean, think about the names who played. Chad Kelly? No.
Right.
Bo Wallace? No.
Right.
Dak Prescott, obviously no. Eli Manning, obviously no.
Right.
You know, I mean, you kind of go through the list of the better quarterbacks.
Better quarterbacks
Nick Fitzgerald,
from Louisiana.
Georgia, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you don't have that. You know, Tyler Russell, I guess, is the last one to be grown from Mississippi and play consistent, better than average minutes at the quarterback position. Then before that, it's Romero.
Yeah, we may be missing someone, but I think
But not at a good to a better than average level, like a memorable level.
Kevin Fant would have been really, really good, but the program literally fell apart around him.
It was nothing there.
He had some huge games, but just had, it was an absolute cluster. So
that's 30 years of football. 30 years of football, and we don't have one Mississippi freshman that's really made an impact until the last two seasons.
Yeah, John Rice Plumlee was fantastic last year. And not taking anything away from JRP, I mean, he had a full roster. I mean, Ole Miss was playing with it. You would think at least, 75 Sky guys? Will Rogers, the last 2 weekends, has had 47 scholarship players and 50 scholarship players and is accurate, smart, poise, all that kind of stuff. Philip Short, we now realize, I was banging that drum in the summer. No doubt he should have been a top 10, top 12 prospect last year. We're going to go to the New Belgium Fat Tire guest line and welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, 247 Sports, genespage.com. Steve joins us on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. All right, Steve. Will Rogers is playing some really good football and showing poise. He's moving around when the pocket collapses around him. He's extending the play, accuracy, everything that's been going on around him. He's really, really playing well. How surprised are you that he's playing this well as a true freshman with limited resources and only about 50 scholarship players around him?
Yeah, I have to admit I am surprised. I mean, and that's not to throw any shade at Will Rogers. I mean, but the fact that I think he has the sixth longest active streak of attempts without an interception in NCAA. His ball placement has been outstanding. I mean, there've been very few passes you look at and say, oh, well, that probably should have been picked off. I mean, not that we buy into the Hugh Kellenberger doctrine or anything about almost interceptions, but yeah, I mean, it's been great. And that's the thing that they told us even in fall camp is that his poise and his football IQ were kind of pretty advanced for his young age. And the fact that he's been able to go on the road the last 2 weeks and play as well as he has been a nice surprise.
He looks more athletic. Not that I shouldn't say that I thought he was, because it's not like I got to see him play 15 games at Brandon. But so I may as well not reference it like that. But he can move, Steve. He can move lateral, and he can even go get the sticks a couple of times a game, which I think will be beneficial for him this year, next, and so on. What do you see?
Yeah, and you saw it last week against Ole Miss. There were a couple times he was able to kind of tuck it and go as those linebackers kind of vacated the underneath zone there. And, when things break down, he is athletic enough to get you a play. But I'll tell you, what's been remarkable to me is his accuracy when rolling to his right. When he gets flushed a little bit, he's still able to keep his eyes downfield and then keep that pass in bounds. There's so many young guys that their momentum kind of gets to them. But when he begins to roll right, his accuracy is incredible. You saw it against Javante Payton against Georgia, did the same thing to Jaden Walley in both games. He just simply finds a way to extend the play, keep his eyes downfield, and throw a catchable football, despite the fact that he's on the run and sometimes running for his life there.
Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, on the Out of Bounds show and the new Belgium Fat Tire guest line. Is it MJ Daniels? There's a lot of chatter that Ole Miss is going to flip several kids from this. This happens every year. I'm now on my 18th signing class doing this. So what is the latest on MJ Daniels, Steve?
Well, we knew when he committed to Mississippi State there was going to be a bit of a roller coaster. And to be fair to MJ, to this point, it really hasn't been here as of late. And, Ole Miss is kind of trying desperately to kind of make some hay in state. I mean, if you look at their commitment list right now, they don't have a single high school player from the state of Mississippi committed. And so that's something to kind of consider, too, is that Ole Miss has gone out and kind of recruited nationally and regionally and struck out with some guys. Now they're kind of coming back in. So, yeah, it's understandable. They're trying to build some momentum based on winning the Egg Bowl. But, MJ is one of those guys, too, that likes being recruited. And so these last couple of weeks are going to be awfully interesting. And, we went through this last year, too. I mean, to talk about Emmanuel Forbes and others, and, there's all these quote-unquote reports of, Ole Miss is just in so-and-so's heart. And a lot of times I think it's just in some Ole Miss fan base media's head rather than these guys' hearts. But, last year Ole Miss didn't flip anybody. I think there's probably a good chance that happens this year. I think there may be a guy or two that flips. I would lean more towards one rather than multiple guys. I think sometimes people enjoy making these reports to kind of get some message board chatter going. But MJ is a guy that has a cousin, Dylan Lawrence, at Mississippi State. He had an uncle that played at Mississippi State. So he's got some Mississippi State people around him. And what I find interesting, too, is, he's had some guys call him trying to influence him by going to Ole Miss. And then he, in turn, has called the Mississippi State staff and kind of filled them in on what's going on. And I think that's probably an encouraging development.
Cruton. Here we go, the last couple of weeks of the real signing day now. There will be another one, though. And as Steve and David Johnson have told us with 247 Sports the last few months, it's crazy because the kids haven't had an opportunity to get on campus 12, 13, 14 times or whatever, even 6, 7, 8 times between junior days and camps and then going to home games in the fall and official visits and eventually in December and or January. So it's super odd with COVID, and we'll see how everything shakes out. Steve, Will Rogers and Jaden Walley, neither one of them were in the top 15 as far as, 247 Sports last year. Yet they played great. I'm looking at some of these other – I don't even know if anybody's come close. You may know because you monitor it more than I do. I know Dylan Johnson's played a little bit, and I'm sure there's some other guys. But could I make a strong argument that no one has been more productive in front of them from last year's class as far as Jaden Walley and Will Rogers?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. And some of that's come out of team need as well. Jaden Walley is a guy I think most people expected him to be a 2 to 3 year project just because of the fact that he was essentially a high school quarterback until the last half of his senior season. And so now here he is out there making plays on the road and, back-to-back 100-yard games, leads Mississippi State in receiving yards at this point, nearly got 500 already. You look at that and say, well, this guy's already breaking freshman records, and then this year doesn't count towards his eligibility. So that gives you a lot of hope for the future. But, back to the Will Rogers thing, we've had this discussion there before. He was a guy that was a bit undervalued as a recruit, and I think he's making a lot of people look a little silly right now. I think you also, too, give Michael Leach a little credit because Mike historically has not played the young guy. Well, there's not a veteran guy to play at this point. So, he's had to kind of get Will ready. And if you just look at the steps that he has taken in recent weeks, I think it says a lot about the coaching he's getting, but also, too, about the fact that he is a guy, comes from a coach's family, comes from a program at Brandon that historically has won. And so now here he is on the college level. So I don't think anybody expected him to be this successful this quickly. And, of course, we talk about the completion percentage being, astronomical in his ball placement and his decision-making. But, yeah, I don't think there's anybody right now in the Mississippi class of 2020 you look back and say, okay, this guy's playing better than Will Rogers. And I think, like as you mentioned, probably the top two producing freshmen in that class are Will Rogers and Jaden Walley.
I can't remember a freshman QB, true freshman, from the state of Mississippi that's had the kind of impact that Will's had, in a while. Other than John Rice Plumlee, who was outstanding last year. So we've gone back to back, but that hasn't been the case the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years for Mississippi State and Ole Miss with true freshman QBs from the state of Mississippi, Steve.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This state historically has not produced a lot of SEC caliber quarterbacks. You've had some good guys over the years that have gone to the G5 and done a good job, but we've had a pretty good stretch here the last couple of years, and I think it's one of those deals, too, where you give our high school coaches some credit, too, to kind of acclimating to the spread offense. And so you have some guys that are kind of coming in a little more polished, perhaps, than they were in years past, because you used to, kind of as a rule of thumb, especially in small-town Mississippi, you put your best athlete at quarterback. That way, if he gets one or two reads in this progression, it's not there, he can tuck it and go. But you've got some guys now out there. You mentioned Wyatt Rogers and those guys at Brandon. Gardner Minshew is a guy that came from that program. And so they are doing some things to prepare these guys for the next level. And then you're just seeing it happen real quickly for Will Rogers as a result.
Have you had I think another guy that was, and we've talked about this, partly because of where he played. I think a lot of these guys are overlooked, unfortunately. They've had a lot of success on offensive line, but MAIS, I think you could argue Phillip Short should have been a top 15 guy. We know that Will Rogers either should have been number one or two, somewhere in there on the as far as ranking prospects. Have you seen that Phillip Short's been playing some good ball for Mississippi Gulf Coast?
He has been. And it's one of those guys, too, as you mentioned, that was a little bit undervalued. But I think that he's the guy that will play his way into some options. Looking at last year's class, I still like McKinley Jackson an awful lot because he is a defensive tackle, and it's kind of a position of luxury. And I do think he'll have a good career there at Texas A&M. He's playing pretty well right now. But back to Phillip Short, he's a guy I think a lot of people last year kind of took a flyer on and said, well, he's a quarterback playing in the MAIS, but then now he's down there at Mississippi Gulf Coast playing, and they're getting ready to play for a championship, and so I think you can be, have a little bit of, revision. You look back at this thing in hindsight and say, what, maybe we missed on this guy, and I think there's a lot of college coaches out there that may feel the same way.
What is left for Mississippi State the next couple of weeks, Steve, other than trying to keep the guys that they have committed? Now, it looks like they're processing some guys, too. So I've got about 4 minutes. Walk me through what's left and what they're trying to do to wrap up this class.
Well, C.J. Johnson from French Camp Academy, he is a guy that his recruitment was just kind of nondescript. For a long time, he committed to Navy, and all of a sudden he's exploded now that his senior film has made the rounds. I believe he's added 13 offers in the last month, including Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Florida State, Penn State, and others. I do expect him to be a Bulldog. He's a guy that's grown up going to games at Mississippi State. Will likely grow into the safety. Could potentially be a corner early in his career. I think he is a guy that Bulldog fans should get excited about. Don't think he leaves the state. And it's one of those things, too, when you have guys that kind of grow up dreaming of playing in your program and then they get a chance to do it. I kind of think about Dave's son, Eli Johnson. I think it's a really cool thing when guys get the opportunity to play at their childhood favorite. I think that is an amazing thing, and I think no matter which school they pick, when that happens, that's a great thing for the young man and his family. That's kind of the situation with CJ. A lot of Mississippi State people around him have always hoped he would have the opportunity to play here. I think he does take advantage of that. He's talking about signing in February, so we'll see how those things kind of play out. Jaden Wiley's younger brother, Justin Wiley, committed to Minnesota. It's a big surprise when he did. I don't think he sticks with that. I think Mississippi State and Ole Miss will battle it out for him. And a lot of times, conventional wisdom would say with Jaden having such a great experience and start, well, that Mississippi State would have an advantage there. It's still one of those situations too where he just doesn't give you a whole lot when he talks. He doesn't share a lot of information, keeps it kind of buttoned up. But that's a recruitment that we're watching really closely down the stretch for sure. And State's got to go out and get one more lineman. Peyton Barber is a guy to Jacksonville, Florida. They've been on for a while, and then there's probably going to be an offer to Cherokee County, Georgia lineman Nathan Simmons soon, and they got to probably overcommit a little bit. I mean, you have to put yourself in a situation like what happens if McKalen Pounders, flips or decommits, and that was a huge recruiting win for State early on. They beat Ole Miss for him in State. He is, the consensus top offensive line prospect in the state of Mississippi, but you don't expect Ole Miss or anybody to go away, this close to signing day. They're going to continue to push, and despite the fact that he's still committed, he put out a list of favorites yesterday, but he's saying privately, hey, I'm still committed to Mississippi State, which is kind of people would say, Steve, you ever seen anything like this? I've been a recruiting 15 years. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun these days. I mean, there's a lot of these guys. It's new names and new schools, but, the stuff's always the same. And when you get closer to signing day, a lot of these guys, you kind of want to generate some heat. And so that's kind of where we are. Social media has kind of opened the door for all that. Guys that commit early lose their hype, and so they try to do some things later in the process to remind people they're valuable.
Yeah. All right. What do you hear? So Mississippi State is scheduled to play Auburn on the 12th. Have they made anything official on the December 19th deal with Missouri?
They hadn't, and I've actually spoken to some people on staff and said that they haven't heard for sure one way or another. That's the expectations. The State's going to play Missouri on the 19th, but there has not been an official announcement by the SEC. Perhaps we get that on Monday of next week. But I think that's what most people are kind of, trending towards, is it'll be Missouri. It's the only thing that makes any sense. But, this year's been so unpredictable, and, who'd have thought last week that we'd found out that State and Ole Miss wouldn't play this week when, both of them have their numbers ready to go, and then they get an unscheduled open date. I don't know how fair that is, to be honest with you. I mean, State and Ole Miss are doing what they're supposed to do, and yet they don't get to play a game this week. And so,
right.
Maybe they both needed the open date, but the fact that their schedule is somewhat hindered and impeded so we can get Alabama and LSU together and Arkansas and Missouri together, it just doesn't seem fair to the in-state schools.
I agree. Steve, I've got 20 seconds here. I just received a text from a listener. Janari Dean and Jevin Banks, are they still on the Mississippi State roster?
Yeah, they are. Janari Dean had season-ending surgery back during fall camp, and Banks is just trying to work his way in. But, yeah, they're still around.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Steve Robertson, genespage.com on the New Belgium Fat Tire guest line. And we'll go ahead and throw in the Parish Canebrake delicious wheat ale out of Louisiana, Parish Canebrake beer. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. David Johnson will join us at 9:30. Ole Miss Insider, Rebels 247. Welcome in. Good morning. We've got a lot to cover in the 8 o'clock hour. More recruiting and more on this 2020 class and 2021 class.